You walk into the kitchen and suddenly you have no idea why you're there. You stand frozen, scanning the countertops for a clue. You were just thinking about it a moment ago, but now the thought is completely gone. What just happened to your brain? You might blame your memory, you might call it a brain fart, but the real answer is far stranger. It turns out, walking through a doorway actually deletes your thoughts. Not because your memory is faulty, but because your brain is running an ancient survival program that sees every room as a new world. And that invisible reset button has been keeping humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years. This is the psychology and neuroscience of event boundaries. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a doorway the same way again. Think about how you move through your day. You start in the bedroom, then you're in the bathroom, then the hallway, then the kitchen. Each room feels like a separate stage. Your brain agrees. It doesn't see your home as one continuous space. It sees it as a series of chapters, each with its own set of rules and memories. When you cross that threshold, your brain takes the mental notebook labeled bedroom and slams it shut. Then it frantically opens a new notebook labeled kitchen and tries to figure out what belongs in this chapter. Anything that didn't get transferred ends up lost. That's the doorway effect. Psychologists call this the event boundary. In 2011, memory researcher Gabriel Radvansky from the University of Notre Dame ran a simple but brilliant experiment. He had people walk through a virtual reality doorway while carrying an object. Then he asked them to identify what they were holding. The moment they crossed a doorway, their recall dropped dramatically. The door itself acted like a mental guillotine, slicing the flow of memory into two separate episodes. It didn't matter if the room was identical. The brain treated it as a completely new context and purged everything that wasn't firmly locked in. Why would your brain do something so seemingly stupid? Because it's not stupid at all. This is a feature, not a bug. Your brain evolved to prioritize survival, not to help you remember grocery lists. To understand the real reason, we have to go back to the environment that shaped your mind. Picture your ancient ancestor walking through the dense jungle. Every new clearing, every cave entrance, every bend in the river was a potential death trap. Predators could lurk in the next bush. Enemy tribes might be camped over the ridge. Your ancestor couldn't afford to carry the same mental model from the safe, open plain into the dark, tangled forest. The brain had to immediately discard old assumptions and load a fresh threat assessment. That mental wipe is exactly what's happening when you walk into the kitchen today. Neuroscientist Jeffrey Sachs from Washington University in St. Louis has spent decades studying how the brain segments experience. His research shows that the brain constantly predicts what's going to happen next based on the current context. When you approach a doorway, your brain registers a spike in uncertainty. The neural networks that maintain your working memory get interrupted. A new event file is created in a region called the hippocampus, while the old one is stored away for long-term use. This process happens in milliseconds. It's not that you forget, it's that your brain actively archives the thought because it assumes you won't need it in the next room. This segmentation is so deep that it even shows up in the brains of rats. Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist John O'Keefe discovered place cells in the hippocampus that fire only when an animal enters a specific location. Different cells fire for different rooms, as if the brain divides the world into a patchwork of isolated maps. When a rat crosses from one room to another, the place cells for the old room switch off within a fraction of a second, and the cells for the new room ignite. Your brain is doing the same thing right now every time you walk through a door. The neural map for the kitchen overwrites the one for the hallway. Your memory of why you came gets buried under a landslide of new sensory data. But here's the counterintuitive twist. This system didn't just evolve for physical spaces. Your brain uses event boundaries everywhere, all day long. Every time you open a new browser tab, your mind runs a tiny reset. When you switch from reading emails to scrolling social media, your brain draws an invisible door and throws your previous thoughts into storage. That's why you can't recall what you were just working on after a 2-minute distraction. The boundary doesn't need a physical door. It only needs a change in context. And this is happening to you constantly. Now here's the strangest part. This ancient mental glitch might actually be what allows you to function in the modern world. If your brain didn't segment experiences, you'd be drowning in an ocean of undifferentiated information. Every memory would blend into every other memory until you had no idea what happened when. The doorway effect is a form of mental hygiene. It clears your working memory, so you can focus fully on the new room and the new potential threats or opportunities it contains. The cost is that you sometimes forget why you walked into the kitchen. The benefit is that you don't walk into the kitchen still mentally fighting off a saber-toothed tiger from the living room. Yet today, the ancient code gets tripped up by modern architecture. In Radvansky's follow-up studies, he found that simply imagining walking through a doorway can trigger the effect. When participants mentally walked from one imagined room to another, their recall still dropped. Just the thought of crossing a boundary was enough to partition the flow of memory. Your brain doesn't need a physical wall. It just needs the concept of, I'm somewhere else now. So when you mentally hop from thinking about your work deadline to thinking about what to eat for dinner, you cross an internal doorway, and the notes from your last chapter vanish. Think about what this means for your day. Every time you walk from your desk to the coffee machine, your brain resets. Every time you click a new app on your phone, your brain resets. Every time a notification pulls you out of deep work, your brain draws a thick, dark line and starts a new page. The old page gets saved, but it's not instantly accessible. You have to actively navigate back to it. That's why you sometimes stand in the hallway and retrace your steps. You're trying to re-enter the previous event so your brain can reload the open file. There's a beautiful irony here. The part of your mind that you curse when you forget why you stood up is the exact same mechanism that allowed your ancestors to survive the African savanna. The doorway effect isn't a design flaw. It's a prehistoric survival reflex that now masquerades as a daily annoyance. Your brain still thinks every door is a cave mouth. Every room change is a potential ambush. So it drops the non-essential cargo, frees up attention, and prepares to scan the new environment for danger. That's why your grocery list evaporates. The brain decided it wasn't relevant to your immediate survival. Of course, that decision was made by a part of your mind you can't consciously access. You don't get to vote on what gets deleted. The event boundary is automatic and ruthless. If you want to beat it, you have to play by its rules. Researchers have discovered a few tricks. The most effective is what they call memory encoding through action. If you physically act out what you intend to do in the next room before you cross the door, the brain latches onto the motor plan and carries it across the boundary. For example, if you're walking to the kitchen to grab scissors, mime the snipping motion with your fingers as you approach the doorway. That action encodes the intention not as a fragile thought, but as a physical sequence. The event boundary treats movement and body state as more important than passive ideas. Because in the wild, motor plans often meant survival, running, climbing, grabbing, throwing. These are the codes that can punch through the door. Another insight comes from the study of memory itself. The hippocampus doesn't just map space, it binds events into a sequence. When you cross a door, the hippocampus stamps the transition. To retrieve the lost thought, you can do what psychologists call context reinstatement. Go back to the room you started in and physically look at the exact spot where you had the original thought. The place cells that were active at that moment will fire again. That often jolts the forgotten memory back into conscious awareness. It's like walking back to the start of the chapter so your brain can reread the last line. So the next time you walk into a room and forget why you came, don't blame your scattered mind. Blame your ancestral survival software. It did exactly what it evolved to do. It scrubbed your mental workspace clean the instant you stepped through a portal into a new world. Because your brain still lives in a time when every new room could mean life or death. And somewhere deep inside your skull, a place cell just switched on for the kitchen, while the one for the hallway went dark. The thought that vanished wasn't erased. It was archived. It's right there waiting for you to walk back and pick it up. After all, you walked into that room looking for something important. And the real answer was never about memory at all. It was about how your brain still sees every doorway as the edge of the unknown.